Now that we know what a singleton is, basically, let's look at real world examples, how you could use them. So first off, we're going to talk about game managers. Game managers are the #1 use case for singleton design pattern in game programming. So game managers usually control essential modules of your game. And I'll give you a few examples. So in simple games, a game manager might be responsible for the win-lose condition, tracking how many points the player has, tracking how much time already passed, or how much time is left until he loses the game or whatever. It's also responsible for pausing the game, loading new levels, spawning enemies, etc. So you see, the game manager is responsible for the high level stuff that's going on in your game. So it shouldn't be responsible for moving your character or rotating coins or whatever, but really the high level stuff like winning or losing the game and so on. So because it's responsible for so many different things, it will probably be accessed from many different scripts. And that's a good indicator why we might want to use a singleton. But the second indicator is even more important, because we usually don't want more than one game manager. Why would we have 2 game managers that track points, track time, pause the game, and so on? That would be counterproductive. So we want to make sure that there can only be one instance of the game manager. And yeah, what better excuse do we need to create a singleton game manager? Now let's look at a real-world practical example where you could use a game manager. This is Hearthstone, Blizzard's trading card game where you can trade, so I guess it's Blizzard's card game. And yeah, it's a very good example of where a game manager can be very, very useful. So I've got a little exercise for you. Look at the screenshot. If you're familiar with card games like Magic the Gathering or like this, Hearthstone, try to think about what a game manager would have to manage in this game. So to give you an example, the first thing that is very hidden, so I'll give it away right away, is it might track the action history that is here on the left. This history just reminds the player which actions have been taken. So you can see here that the Wolf Rider has been played, also the Murloc has been played, and the Shaman, and so on. So yeah, this is something that the game manager might do. Another thing is that he might be responsible that the players draw cards when their turn starts. But yeah, I want you now to pause this video and think about, for what should the game manager in this game be responsible? Okay, now I'll just discuss a few of the things that I came up with, but there are many, many more, and it's not like this is something that's set in stone and that's absolute. Every programmer might do this a little bit differently. So if I didn't list the stuff you came up with, you probably have done nothing wrong, okay? Now, the next thing I came up with is to shuffle cards. There are, at the start of the game, the cards need to be shuffled. Also, there are cards which shuffle your deck, so this is something the game manager might do. Also, each player has only a set amount of time for his turn. And yeah, I think the game manager should also be responsible for tracking how long the player's turn has already been going on. Next up, it should ensure that there are not too many minions on board. Also, it should check the win and lose condition if a player has less than 0 health, for example. Also, it might need to track whose turn it is, what happens when a turn ends. It needs to determine who begins the game and who gets the coin. Also, it might need to track which creatures have already attacked, because in Hearthstone you can only attack once with every creature, except if you have the Wind Fury trait on a card. But yeah, that's a special case. And there are so much more functionalities, so much more. That's a lot of things, you know, and maybe that's even too much for one class. So we're going to talk later when a game manager might need to be split down into multiple different managers. Now, I've put together a chart where you can see how the game manager could work. So I've got different modules. For example, here I have a UI module, and I have an in-game module, and I have an options module, and all of those modules might access the game manager in some way. So this is just something to make it a little bit abstractly visible to you for how you can connect your different modules with your game manager. Now, just as a friendly reminder, there can only be one game manager. It wouldn't make sense to have more than one. And many classes use the game manager and need references to it. And yeah, those are perfect excuses to make it a singleton. Now, let's look at small, medium, and big projects. Now, small projects might be okay with just one game manager that handles everything: score, player deaths, respawning, and so on. If you are programming Flappy Bird, you won't need more than one game manager. However, let's look at medium-sized projects, like for example Hearthstone. I mean, Hearthstone is a big project, but let's just say a very, very simplified trading card game. I would highly suggest not creating one game manager that has so many different responsibilities, but split it up into a few simpler managers. For example, we could split it up into a board manager. This manager is just responsible that there are not too many minions on the board, that a minion that has already attacked can't attack a second time, and so on and so on, okay? Next, we might need a turn manager that's responsible for tracking whose turn it is. This manager might also track the history of the game. Also, it might make a player draw a card and so on. And the last thing is very important. It's a UI manager. And this is extremely important because I highly suggest that you create a UI manager that handles all the UI stuff. So if you have a player and this player needs, I don't know, to change his health points or something, I highly advise against changing the health bar directly from the player. Instead, I would encourage you to at least create a UI manager and make the player just say, Mr. UI Manager, please update the health bar. So that way it's a little bit more decoupled, and your different modules of your game aren't too tightly coupled and too interwoven with one another. Now, lastly, if you have large projects, I really advise to not use game managers or singletons at all. I mean, you can use game managers, but not with a singleton design pattern. Instead, use dependency injection. I'll give you a link to an article which explains dependency injection, but yeah, I really advise against using singletons in very large projects. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I want to invite you to my course over at Udemy. This course is solely devoted to design patterns in Unity, and there you will gain access to premium quality exercises and examples for these design patterns. Also, I will talk about more specialized and more advanced implementations of these design patterns. So if you press on the link in the description below, you will get a discount on the course. Anyways, I'll see you in the next video.